The room was warm. The kind of warm that comes from too many bodies and not enough air, from candles burning down to their last inch, from the particular energy of people performing happiness at each other across linen tablecloths. 43 people. Solomon had counted them when he arrived, the way he always counted things. Not obsessively, just accurately. 43 people. 12 tables. One long rectangular head table, where Kendrick was already standing, with a champagne flute raised above his shoulder like a torch. Solomon sat near the back, third table from the wall. He had not been assigned this seat. He had chosen it the moment he walked in. Angled, slightly removed, with a clean sight line to the front and an unobstructed path to the door. Old habit. Kendrick tapped the side of his glass. Once. The room quieted immediately, the way rooms always quiet for men who own the silence before they speak. "I want to say something," Kendrick said, "about what it means to build something from nothing." Solomon lifted his water glass and took one slow sip. "I've spent the last 3 years watching this company grow from a pitch deck and a prayer into something that 40 of the most respected investors in this city have now put their names behind." A pause. Practiced. But none of that would mean anything without the personal clarity to know what and who you're building it with. A murmur of appreciation moved through the room. "There's a version of this story," Kendrick continued, eyes moving to Naomi seated to his right, "that almost didn't happen. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from what's comfortable, from what's familiar, from what feels like enough, when you know deep down that you were built for more." Naomi smiled, not at the room, at Kendrick. "To clarity," Kendrick said, "and to the courage it takes to find it." 43 glasses rose. Solomon did not raise his. He set his water glass down on the tablecloth with the same steadiness he did everything, without performance, without emphasis. He unfolded the cloth napkin from his lap, refolded it once, and placed it beside the bread plate. He pushed his chair back, stood, and walked toward the exit. No one called after him. No one tracked him across the room. He passed through the door, through the lobby with its marble floors and its ambient piano, through the revolving glass door, and into the night air, where his 6-year-old sedan was parked exactly where he left it, third row from the entrance, just past the valet stand. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment without starting the engine. Through the restaurant's tall windows, he could see the glow of the room. He could see Kendrick leaning toward Naomi. He could see her laughing. He started the engine. He drove home. What Kendrick did not know, what Naomi did not know, what no one at that table of 43 knew, was that Solomon had been invited to that dinner. Not by Naomi, by Kendrick. A deliberate invitation. A theater ticket handed to the man Kendrick had decided was the before. An invitation to sit in the audience and watch someone else take the stage of a life that used to belong to him. Kendrick had wanted a witness to his victory. He had selected the wrong witness. Solomon had come, as requested. He had watched, as intended. He had eaten the bread and drunk the water and listened to the toast. And then he had driven home through a city that did not know his name, which was exactly how he had always preferred it. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy powerful, emotional stories filled with betrayal, secrets, and unforgettable revenge, don't forget to subscribe to Black Plight Tales, because this story, it only gets crazier from here. There is a particular kind of quiet that only exists in the very early morning, when the streets have not yet decided what kind of day they are going to be. Solomon had always been most comfortable in that quiet. He had built his entire life inside it. Go back 8 years. Solomon is 31 years old, sitting at a folding table in a studio apartment with a laptop, a legal pad, and a cold cup of coffee. He is not building a brand. He is not executing a strategy. He is doing what he has always done, reading the structure underneath things. The rental market in the city has been shifting for 3 years in a way that no one in the mainstream investment press has noticed yet, because the people writing about money are not the same people who move money quietly. Solomon notices. He reads the filings. He maps the holding structures. He builds a model on the legal pad and stares at it for a long time. Then he opens his laptop and makes his first acquisition. Not a property, an LLC that holds a property, a shell inside a shell. $9,000, borrowed from himself, structured in a way that keeps his name nowhere near the public record. He is not being secretive for the sake of secrecy. He is being structurally clean. He has read enough case history to know that visible wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. Litigation, unsolicited partnership requests, entitlement from people who suddenly remember they love you. He wants none of it. He wants the work. He wants the structure. He wants to build something that is, in its own way, airtight. By the time Solomon is 34, he holds controlling interests in 11 companies, a laundromat chain through one entity, a small commercial property management firm through another, a regional logistics operator that nobody has heard of, but that moves freight for 4 of the largest retailers in the state. He drives a used car. He eats at the same diner every Tuesday. He teaches a single adjunct course in economics at the local college, not because he needs the income, but because he cannot stand to be entirely removed from the ordinary world. It keeps his thinking calibrated. It keeps him human in a way that the spreadsheets on their own cannot. That is where he meets Naomi. She is taking his course as a continuing education credit. She works in marketing. She sits in the 3rd row with a yellow legal pad and actually takes notes. She argues with him about marginal utility in a way that makes him laugh out loud, which almost never happens in a classroom. After class 1 Tuesday, she waits. She asks him to explain the part about structural incentives again. He does, standing in the empty room for 20 minutes, and by the end of it, they are talking about something else entirely, and neither of them wants to stop. Solomon falls in love with Naomi the way he falls into everything. Quietly, completely, without announcement. She knows he teaches. She knows he has some investments. He tells her this once, in the way someone might mention a hobby. Not evasively, just without weight. She does not press. She is not, at this point, a woman particularly focused on money. She is curious and driven and warm. She laughs easily. She pushes back when she disagrees, and never performs the disagreement for an audience. For 3 years, this is enough. For 3 years, it is genuinely, specifically enough. Then the city changes, or maybe the people in it do. A particular kind of success becomes visible in ways it wasn't before. Not quiet success, not structural success, but performed success. People Naomi knows begin to live in a way that broadcasts its own cost. Restaurants that require a referral. Vacations that exist primarily as photographs. Events at which the most important thing is simply being known to have been there. Solomon notices the shift in her before she does. He notices the way she begins to hold their apartment up against other apartments in conversation. The way she describes his work to people at parties with a slight, almost imperceptible hesitation before the word teaches. He notices. He does not say anything. He is not a man who speaks before he is certain what he wants the words to do. Naomi meets Kendrick at a client event. Kendrick is everything that is legible as success in the way their world has come to define it. One company, recently funded, recently featured in the kind of press that exists to make companies feel like movements. He speaks the language of vision and disruption fluently. He has a very good watch. He fills a room in a way that Solomon has never felt the need to. The entanglement happens slowly, then suddenly, in the way these things always do. Now, the structure beneath the thing. What nobody at that dinner knows, what Kendrick does not know, what his investors do not know, what Naomi's attorney does not know, is that buried within the holding architecture of Solomon's 34th company is a parent entity, a quiet, legally unremarkable holding firm incorporated 6 years ago in a state with favorable disclosure laws. That firm holds, through 2 intermediary structures, a 61% controlling equity stake in the parent company that owns Kendrick's business. Not a minority position, not an advisory role. 61%. Majority. Control. Kendrick raised $110 million in total across 3 funding rounds. He did it through a venture syndicate whose lead partner co-invested with a fund. That fund was acquired. The acquisition was not covered in the press because it was structured as an asset transfer, not a merger. The acquiring entity is the 31st company in Solomon's portfolio. Solomon never attended a board meeting. He never sent an email with his name in the signature. There was never a reason to. The structure functioned correctly. The investment generated returns. He watched, from a distance, the way he watches everything, with the patience of someone who knows how the math resolves. He did not acquire this position to ruin anyone. He acquired it because the underlying business had real value, and the entry price was favorable, and the structural terms were clean. That is all. That is always all. The marriage ends on a Wednesday morning, not dramatically. Naomi places a folder on the kitchen counter. Separation documents, already drawn up, already signed on her side, and says, "I think we've both known for a while." Solomon looks at the folder. He looks at Naomi. He picks up his coffee mug and takes a sip. "All right," he says. Naomi blinks. She was prepared for something else, for resistance or negotiation or grief made audible. She gets a man who says "all right" the way someone confirms a weather forecast. "That's it?" she says. "What would you like me to add?" he says. She does not have an answer for that. She picks up her bag and walks out, and the door closes, and Solomon stands at the kitchen counter with his coffee and the folder, and the specific quiet of a life that has just been formally altered. He does not cry. He does not sit down. He finishes his coffee, rinses the mug, and calls his attorney. What he learns in that call is interesting. Naomi's attorney has filed a motion to freeze his personal accounts and seize a portion of what she has characterized as marital business assets. The assets her legal team spent 3 weeks locating, the ones they are confident represent the full scope of Solomon's financial life, are the teaching salary, a small personal brokerage account, and a minority stake in a local printing company that he acquired 7 years ago as part of a favor to a colleague. They found the printing company. They did not find the other 33. His attorney asks what he would like to do. "Nothing yet," Solomon says. "Let it process." "They're going to freeze the personal account," his attorney says. "That's fine. There's enough in it to cover what they think I'm worth." "There's also something I need you to look at," Solomon says. He reads out a 14-digit entity registration number. "Pull the cap table on that. Then tell me what you find 3 layers down." The silence on the other end of the call is the kind that means the attorney is doing the math in real time. "Good God," the attorney says, quietly. "It's been there since the 3rd year of the marriage," Solomon says. "I need you to review what the current triggering conditions are on the shareholder agreement." There is something else Solomon does not mention on the call, something he has known for 4 days and has been sitting with in the way he sits with everything, without rushing it toward a conclusion. Naomi's attorney is a partner at Callaway & Reed. Callaway & Reed is the retained outside counsel for his 27th holding company. Naomi's attorney has been filing motions against a client of her own firm for 4 days without knowing it. The conflict of interest, once surfaced, will be a problem for the firm. It will be a problem for the case. It will not be a problem for Solomon. He does not call anyone to tell them this. He writes it on a legal pad, folds the page once, and puts it in the desk drawer. Then he goes to work. The dinner invitation arrives 3 weeks after the separation documents are signed. It comes by email. The subject line reads, "Thought it would be good for you to see what we've built. K." Kendrick's initial. A deliberate provocation dressed as a wound to make Solomon sit in a room and understand exactly what he had lost and exactly what had replaced him. Solomon accepts. He selects a chair near the back with a sightline to the door. He arrives before the room fills. He eats the bread. He drinks the water. He watches Kendrick work the room with the practiced ease of a man who has confused the performance of confidence for the thing itself. And then, before the toast ends, Naomi stands. She had not been on the program. Kendrick nods at her encouragingly. This is spontaneous, or it is performed as spontaneous, which amounts to the same thing in a room of 43 people. "I just want to say something," Naomi says. Her posture is different. Everything about her is calibrated for a version of herself that this room is meant to witness. I spent a long time telling myself that quiet was the same thing as content, that someone choosing not to show up in the world was just private. That I should be grateful for stability. A few people nod. It took me a long time to understand that what I was calling stability was actually me making myself small, fitting myself around someone else's comfort, around someone who was never going to grow. She pauses. I'm not doing that anymore. The room applauds, tastefully, the way rooms applaud things they find affirming without quite understanding. Solomon is sitting 9 tables away. His face does not change. His former colleagues are in this room. 3 people he introduced Naomi to are in this room. They do not look at him. They look at their hands, or their glasses, or the ceiling, performing the small mercies of people who do not know what to do with someone else's public humiliation. Naomi sits back down. Kendrick puts his hand over hers. Solomon refolds his napkin. He stands. He walks out. He does not make a phone call that night. He does not send a text. He drives home, sits in the chair he always sits in, and opens his laptop. He pulls up a document he created 2 years ago, a scheduled legal review trigger built into the shareholder agreement of the parent holding entity, designed to activate automatically upon any attempt to externally acquire or dilute the equity structure. The trigger exists because Solomon always builds triggers into structures, not out of suspicion, out of cleanliness. The Series B filing, $40 million, a new lead investor, a restructured cap table, constitutes exactly the kind of external equity event the trigger was designed to flag. His attorney flagged it 6 days ago. Solomon had acknowledged the flag and let it sit. Now he types 4 words into the document. Proceed as written. He closes the laptop, he makes tea, he goes to bed. He does not attack. He simply stops protecting them from the structure he built before they ever knew him well enough to underestimate him. The due diligence process for a Series B of this size is standard. The lead investor's legal team is thorough. It is their job to be thorough. They pull audited financials, IP assignments, employment contracts, regulatory filings, and the cap table. The cap table is where it begins. Layer 1, clean. Founder shares, early employees, the 3 seed investors. Layer 2, the Series A syndicate, also clean, names the attorneys recognize. Layer 3, a holding entity, registered, unremarkable, inactive in the sense that it has never communicated with the board. The attorneys note it and move down. Layer 4, another holding entity, registered in a different state. The attorneys cross-reference the registration number against the public database. Layer 5, a parent company. The attorneys pull the public filing. Layer 6, a name. Not a company name, a personal name. Solomon. A name that has never appeared in any coverage of Kendrick's company, never appeared in any press release, never been mentioned in any room that any of the people in this building have ever shared. The name of a man who teaches one adjunct economics course at a local college, drives a 6-year-old sedan, and was recently separated from the woman currently living in Kendrick's apartment. The lead attorney sets down her pen. She looks through the glass wall of the conference room at Kendrick, who is pacing the small anteroom with his phone pressed to his ear, periodically glancing in with the confident impatience of someone who has already decided this meeting is a formality. She asks her associate to pull the shareholder agreement. The shareholder agreement contains a clause. The clause was not hidden. It was in the standard documentation submitted at the time of the original investment, reviewed by 3 sets of attorneys over 2 years, none of whom flagged it because it resembles a standard protective provision inserted by minority shareholders to guard against dilution. Except Solomon is not a minority shareholder. He holds 61%. And the clause specifies that any attempt to execute a dilutive equity event, such as a Series B restructuring, without written consent from the controlling shareholder, is subject to automatic equity recalculation and immediate governance review. There has been no written consent. There was never a request for written consent because Kendrick did not know the controlling shareholder existed. The lead attorney closes the document. She looks again through the glass at Kendrick pacing the anteroom with his phone and his good watch and his absolute certainty that the next $40 million is already his. She stands. She walks to the door. She opens it. "Kendrick, could you come in, please?" He enters, still holding his phone, still carrying the easy energy of a man about to be handed $40 million. He sits at the head of the conference table, which is not his seat in this room, but no one corrects him. "We've completed our initial review of the cap table," the attorney says. Her voice is even. She is not unkind. She is simply precise. "I need to ask you a question, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." Kendrick nods. "Sure, of course." "Do you know," she says, "who owns 61% of your parent entity?" The room holds very still. Kendrick's face moves through several things in rapid succession. Confusion, calculation, a brief reach for confidence, and then something underneath all of it that has no performance left in it whatsoever. What? The attorney slides the printed filing across the table. "The controlling equity position in your parent company was established 6 years ago. It has never been altered. The shareholder agreement attached to that position includes a dilution protection clause that has been triggered by the current Series B filing." Kendrick looks at the paper. He reads the name at the top. He reads it again. He knows that name. He knows Solomon's name the way you know someone's name when you invited them to a dinner specifically so they could watch you win. He knows Solomon's name the way you know someone's name when you have spent 18 months building something in the certainty that the man who used to be beside this woman had nothing, was a footnote that the story had already moved past. "That's not possible," Kendrick says. It is not a legal argument. It is the sound of a mind that cannot reorganize itself around a fact that dismantles its entire architecture. "The filing is registered and current," the attorney says. "We'll need written consent to proceed with the Series B restructuring. We'll also need to pause the closing while we review the full scope of the governance implications." Pause? For how long? That depends on conversations we're not able to have without the controlling shareholder's attorney present. Kendrick stares at the paper. Then he reaches for his phone. He opens his contacts. He scrolls. Solomon's name is not there. Not because it was ever deleted, but because it was never saved. Not once in the time that Kendrick moved through Naomi's life did he think to save Solomon's number. Solomon was not a person who needed to be reached. He was not a person who registered as important enough to keep on hand. He now needs that number, and he does not have it. And the woman across the table is watching him understand this, with the patient, unreadable expression of someone whose job is simply to wait for comprehension to arrive. Naomi is at the restaurant downstairs. She is waiting for the celebration dinner. The reservation is for 6 o'clock. It is currently 4:47, and Kendrick was supposed to be done in 20 minutes. Her phone rings. She looks at the screen. His name. She answers. What's wrong? The pause that follows tells her everything. How long have you known him? Kendrick says. His voice has a quality she has not heard in it before. I need to know everything you know about what Solomon owns. Everything. What are you talking about? His investments. Did he ever tell you anything specific? Companies, holdings, anything at all? Naomi thinks. She is already in this moment doing a kind of restructuring, pulling up every conversation she can remember about Solomon's work, his finances, the way he described himself. He teaches. He has some investments. He never talked about any of it specifically. I always thought he was just... She stops. Just what? Kendrick says. The word she was going to use was comfortable. She was going to say she always assumed Solomon was simply comfortable. Not wealthy, not strategic, just stable, in the way of someone with a pension and a modest portfolio and no particular ambition beyond the life he had. A man who was content with enough, because enough was all he had. She does not say the word. The word has become, in the last 30 seconds, the most expensive assumption of her adult life. You need to call him, Kendrick says. I need you to call Solomon and ask him. I'm not calling him, Naomi says. We're separated. Naomi. The way he says her name now is different from every other time he has said it. All the warmth is still technically present, but underneath it, something has shifted. The specific shift of a man who has just discovered that a person he considered a prop in his story is actually the author of it. Please, I need you to call him. She ends the call. She sits in the restaurant with the bread basket and the 2 champagne flutes and the reservation for 6 o'clock. And she thinks about a man standing at a kitchen counter, saying, "All right," without raising his voice. She thinks about the folder on the counter and the coffee mug rinsed and placed upside down in the drying rack. She thinks about 8 years of Tuesday dinners and legal pads, and a man who taught 1 class a week and never once talked about money, as though it defined him. And she begins, slowly, precisely, and far too late, to understand what kind of man does that, and why. Solomon's attorney receives a call from Kendrick's attorney at 6:14 that evening. The call is professional. Kendrick's attorney is very good. He speaks clearly and moves quickly, and proposes 3 structures for resolution, all of which are, in their different ways, attempts to renegotiate a position that is not open for renegotiation. Solomon's attorney listens. He then says, "I'll pass the proposals along." He calls Solomon at 8:30, reads the proposals. There is a silence. "What do you want to do?" his attorney asks. "None of what he's offering addresses the dilution clause violation," Solomon says. "No," his attorney agrees. "It doesn't." "Then there's nothing to decide tonight. Let the governance review run its course." "The Series B will be dead within 30 days if we don't consent," his attorney says. $40 million. I know. Kendrick will lose the company within 60 if the investor pulls. I know. A pause. "You've held this position for 6 years, his attorney says. Not a question. Yes. You never once used it. No. What changed? Solomon is quiet for a moment. Not calculating, just honest. Nothing changed, he says. I just stopped standing between them and what was always going to be true. His attorney is quiet for a moment. The Calloway and Reed conflict surfaces Monday. Naomi's attorney will have to recuse. The asset freeze motion collapses. And the other 33 companies? Do you want to surface any of them? No, Solomon says immediately. No. This was never about showing anyone what I have. He hangs up. He makes tea. He sits in his chair, in the specific, unperformative quiet of a man who has been this person his entire adult life and will continue to be this person tomorrow morning, regardless of what any filing says. Naomi calls at 10:41. Solomon looks at the screen. He lets it ring 4 times. Then he answers. Hi, she says. Hi. A long silence, the kind with too much inside it to collapse into language quickly. I didn't know, Naomi says. I know you didn't, Solomon says. Why didn't you ever... She stops. Starts again. Her voice is steady, but only just. Why didn't you just tell me, Solomon? Why didn't you show me what you'd built? He is quiet for a moment. Not calculating. Just honest, in the specific way that costs something. Because I wanted someone, he says, who would stay in a room with me before they knew what the room was worth. She doesn't say anything. And when you left, he says, I had my answer. He says it without cruelty, without satisfaction, the way someone reads a result from a model they built, not with triumph, not with grief, just with the precise acceptance of a man who made a hypothesis and watched it resolve exactly as the math predicted. I'm sorry, Naomi says. I know, Solomon says. What happens now? The governance review will take about 30 days. Your attorney has a conflict of interest that will surface Monday. I'd recommend she recuse herself proactively. It'll be cleaner for you. A pause. That's not what I meant, Naomi says quietly. I know, Solomon says. Good night, Naomi. He hangs up. He finishes his tea. He washes the mug and places it upside down in the drying rack, the same way he always does, the same way he was doing the morning she left the folder on the counter. He turns off the kitchen light. The apartment goes dark, except for the city through the window, which is always lit, which never requires anything from him, which simply continues being what it is. 6 months later, Kendrick is in a smaller office, in a co-working space, in a part of the city that is not the part his name used to be associated with. The Series B did not close. The lead investor withdrew after the governance review surfaced the full scope of the equity situation. 3 Series A investors, prompted by the due diligence fallout, exercised their own protective provisions and reduced their exposure. The company did not collapse entirely. It is not the kind of collapse that makes news. It is the kind that makes a Tuesday morning feel like a different country from the one you expected to be living in. There is a payment plan. There is a renegotiated office lease. There is a LinkedIn post about pivoting towards sustainable growth that received 47 likes, none of them from the investors who used to return his calls the same day. The watch is the same. The suit is the same. The confidence is different. Not gone, just recalibrated. The particular confidence of a man who has learned that the ground beneath him belonged to someone else has a specific texture. It is quieter, less portable, less certain of its welcome in rooms it used to enter without thinking. Naomi lives in an apartment now. Not the apartment from before, and not the apartment that had been part of the life she stepped into. That lease ended early, in the way things end when the structure supporting them quietly dissolves. Her work is good. She is competent, and she knows it. The social world she had been navigating, The dinners and the events and the particular currency of proximity to visible success is available to her differently now. Not closed, just legible in a way it wasn't before. She understands what she was reading and what she missed and what the cost of that misreading was. She doesn't villainize herself. She sits with it. It is not comfortable sitting. Solomon teaches his adjunct course on Tuesday mornings. He eats at the same diner. He drives the same car. Last Thursday, he was at his nephew's school play. 3rd row, center, arrived 5 minutes early. His nephew plays a tree. Solomon watched him play a tree with the same quality of attention he brings to everything, which is the quality of a man who understands that presence is not something you earn through the size of the room you're in. It is something you practice until it becomes structural. He is not undamaged. He carries what the marriage was and what it became, and the specific grief of being precisely seen by someone who then decided that precision was not enough. He carries it the way he carries everything, internally, without announcement, without making the carrying the point. He is simply, irreducibly, undeniable. Not because 43 people at a dinner finally understand what he was worth, but because Solomon always knew. And knowing, quiet, patient, structural knowing, was always enough. So here's the question I want you to sit with after the screen goes dark. Naomi didn't leave Solomon because he was poor. She left him because she couldn't read him. And the question isn't whether Solomon should have opened the architecture of his life and walked her through it floor by floor. The question is this: why do we only start trying to understand what someone is worth after someone else tells us they were worth something?